In this episode, we interview Rick Snyder, an entrepreneur, author, and executive coach specializing in intuitive intelligence and leadership development. He's the author of Decisive Intuition, a book that provides a practical guide for how one can tap into their intuition. We cover a lot of interesting topics on intuition, Mitra. What would you say are the key takeaways?
I think the fact that we talked about where his first connection with his intuition was fascinating for me because he was very young when that happened, and how he translated that and brought that into the expert world of business. I loved hearing about how there's a role of playful, magical child in every one of us and in him that is important when we're connecting to our intuition, the role of prayer. And in general, it was just fascinating to listen to him and see how he brings something so not tangible like intuition into such a tangible world of business and executive coaching. This inner and outer, the marriage of inner outer was fascinating to me. And I love the fact that we also had a great example and practice of how do we do that? Like I'm sitting there, want to make a decision. Is there a practice, a simple practice that can take me to my intuition and help me with a decision making? So that was my takeaway.
Yeah, and what I loved is the differentiation between ego and true intuition, and how to decipher between the two. So lots of great juicy content in this episode. We hope you all enjoy. So, intuition. I was able to myself hone my intuition reading your book. And I was so impressed by how you took something that was formless, invisible, in the minds of many, esoteric, and you were able to provide a very practical guide and steps to how us as individuals and leaders of organizations could hone our intuition. And I know that for you, writing this book it seems like somewhat spontaneously, and you weren't necessarily planning to do it. I'm curious to hear about what inspired you to take this thing that most people have not been able to figure out how to give some structure to, and to believe that you can do it and to do it the way that you did. So would love to hear the story behind that.
I'm going to take you to my family dining room table for a moment and imagine mother, father, me and my sister. And there's one conversation happening at the table, but then there's the real conversation that's not being talked about. So the family tensions, the resentments, the unspoken truths, all the things that were in the space that I could feel and my sister could feel too. And my parents' refusal to really acknowledge and have that level of conversation with each other. And yet there was this kind of pretend, everything's okay. Everything's great. What are you talking about? How was your day at school? And so that was really confusing as a little guy, where I could feel the real conversation, but then the one the adults are having, and it didn't make sense. I didn't know what to do with that. And so literally, I didn't know how to process that. I didn't know what to do, what story to believe, right? So I didn't realize or appreciate that actually was the beginning of my training. That is actually such a blessing of listening to those invisible conversations that are going on all the time. Fast forward to politics and media and all the conversations that are happening out here, but there's a real conversation that people are still not talking about. So it happens all over in our world. And I think the average person, the average listener right here is getting more savvy to those things, but that hasn't always been the case. And so I was impacted in a big way around trying to use my emotional intelligence and my intuitive intelligence. And I didn't trust it. I was basically coached out of it as a kid and basically taught and role modeled, that doesn't matter. This is the story. This is the narrative. But then as I got older, I think I just got more savvy, and especially in adolescence, not standing for the typical status quo story and just getting more curious about, wait a minute, this is bullshit. I don't believe you guys. You guys don't like each other, or you guys are not happy with each other. And in fact, you're miserable. Why is that? Stop pretending. And then being willing to start having some of those conversations, which are not comfortable. They can be super awkward, sometimes extra defensiveness arises and all the things. denial, all that. And it was the beginning of my training in many ways. Was my very childhood in starting to decode this other language and communication that's happening all the time. That was the roots, I would say.
And the point where you decided, okay, there needs to be a book. I need to write about this.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you made the decision to write the book, how much did you actually understand of intuition? Or did you just have the intuitive nudge to write the book and just trust that your understanding of it would unravel as you write it?
Great question. I've had a couple really powerful moments in my life, chapters in my life, where I've had strong intuitive hits about, and it's usually geographical. Oh, go to Nepal. There's a spiritual teacher there to learn from. Go to Boulder, Colorado for your next steps in your development in grad school. So I've had some big moments like that at times. And for the book, when that came up, I had this intuitive blast to go to France. And I literally looked down at my heart center and said, but I don't speak French. Because the ego mind was like, that doesn't compute. What? France? That doesn't make sense. I'm living in Oregon at the time. But what came from that is I wasn't happy in my life. I was in a job that started to feel stale, and I knew it wasn't my deeper gifts or offerings. And I'm sure a lot of listeners can really relate to that, where how many times have we all been in some kind of career where we know it's winding down, but we're still there, or it's comfortable, or there's a lot of benefits, so we stay.
Yeah.
Same with a relationship. And so I was still there, and I was like, there's something else I'm craving, but I don't quite know what it is. So that's when I started listening to, what is it that I want to teach? What is it that I want to coach? What is it that I want to live? What's the conversation that I want to be having in the next 5 to 10 years? And so I've always had this passion for intuition. And for some reason, I've always attracted intuitive people to my life. And they've literally sometimes been a mentor for me, or a colleague, or even someone that I've dated, or something like that, that I've gotten to learn so much and learn how to trust my own senses, learn how to trust those invisible conversations from those relationships. And so that's really what started the book writing, at first moving to France and taking that huge step. And I also want to share, it wasn't all rosy colored pots of gold and all those things. The first 6 weeks that I was there, I was depressed. I went through some disillusionment. Oh my God, I just wrapped up my life, put everything in storage, sold my car, sold all the things, and moved to France. And as I turned 40 years old, what am I doing? This is crazy. And I feel very lonely. I don't even know what they're saying besides merci and croissant. Beyond that, I was lost.
Oh, French people would be happy to hear that.
Oh man, not the most. If you don't speak English, they do not bend to English, which in some ways made me had to learn French, right?
Yeah.
But those first 6 weeks were tough and lonely, and I had all the doubts around, what did I just make the biggest mistake? Was that my intuition? Like all the doubts that can come from that, right? Oh my God. And so I had to go through that. And then eventually I found my land legs in France. And I finally found a foundation and a community and language. And it took time, but it happened. I ended up being there for 3 years, and it was incredible. And that's where the book came from. And to answer your specific question, I didn't really know a lot of the components that I was going to write about, but I knew I wanted to break down how do we access our intuitive intelligence in a practical way. And I wanted to figure out, like, what are the steps? The part I didn't know as much that was exciting to learn about was like the neuroscience of intuition, which really grounds the conversation. And also interviewing a bunch of other leaders of how they use intuition. So it's not just about my theories. I want to get some more research of how real people are using this in effective ways.
Many leaders, it seems like unconsciously they're using it. Yeah,
totally. A lot of entrepreneurs will trust that more. They'll trust their gut more. But when you get to like middle management or so, they're less trusting of that. And they're more like just following the authorities' directives. So I noticed that difference also, that when you're at a certain level, you allow yourself more freedom to take those risks.
You almost have to as an entrepreneur, because there's so many unknowns. You just can't figure it out. Like sometimes all you have is your gut feeling, your intuition.
Even if people around you are saying like, don't do it or don't press go.
So Rick, you guys went too fast for me. Let me know. This was great. But I'm still interested in that little boy who was sitting at the dinner table. And that was an amazing insight for a young person to have. however you understood it then. I'm sure you're packaging it differently now as an adult, but to realize that and to remember that as a point of reference, I think that is really priceless. And my true interest right now, curiosity, is to know how much that particular boy informs your life today.
Great question. I would say it is probably the most important relationship that I have.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean I always listen or include that voice in every moment of my day. And I feel like I would like to include that even more.
Mm-hmm.
But having that kind of connection to that core part of me is essential. And it's helped incredibly in terms of learning about myself, learning about who's leading in my relationships. Is it my little guy or is it me as an adult? So it's been huge to do some of that kind of parts work and develop that relationship over time.
And what is the difference, if you can guide us there, between the intuition, as you called him, the little guy, and the big guy that is talking to us? Can you tell us, shed some light on that? What kind of intuition does this little Rick offer and the experienced adult Rick offers?
Yeah, I would say the core, like younger part of me in many ways is the magical part of me.
Yeah.
It's like my magic. And I freaking love magic. I wish there was more magic in the world that was embraced in every way.
Okay. So you said a statement that I like to unfold.
Okay.
There was more magic. And what did you say after that?
I wish there was
That
more
we
magic
embrace.
in the world that the
That
world
we would
embraced.
embrace. What if
Because-
there is magic, but we don't embrace it?
Exactly. And I think that's the sad part is my little guy often feels sad that there's so much magic that's not being paid attention to. The curiosity is not there as much.
Mhm.
I see it a lot more with kids and children.
Mhm.
Like children still have that,
Mhm.
but it's almost like the book Catcher in the Rye.
Mhm.
Did you guys read that?
Yes, I have.
That hit me so hard when I read that I think it was junior high when I read that, where the story of basically the hero of the book wanted to save the kids from basically growing up in a certain way because he saw what would happen where their magic would get diluted. And he had his own heartbreak when he saw that moment happen, whether there was 11 years old, 12, 13, whatever time that was, where that kind of got shattered. And so that really hit me hard. So I feel like my little guy felt the same way of there's this point where it seems like we get conditioned out of that.
Mhm.
Not everybody,
Mhm.
but it sure seems to happen a lot on the mainstream level.
Especially in the world that you are working with, if I am allowed to make a little bit of a generalization here, that the world that pays too much attention to the rational mind and basically shies away from the magical world that child has. We all have. Some of us lose it earlier. Some of us never lose it. Some of us lose it somewhere in the middle. I'm really interested in that magical little boy because I think he is the key to your success and a great marketing team. But that's the visible. That's the visible. The invisible part of it to me is held in the little hands of that little Rick. So what do you do or what would you like to do? So we can use this forum as a unfolding of that. How would you like to give more, say, power, attention to that boy that holds the magic?
He likes nature a lot.
Mhm.
And so for me, spending more time intentionally in nature. And one thing I don't do enough of that I want to do more of is putting my bare feet on the ground.
Grounding.
Yeah. I've been
'Cause I-
doing that daily. It's amazing
Yeah,
lately over the last several weeks. Yeah.
It's been coming to me as it's a practice I want to have more in my daily life
Mhm.
because it's so easy to run in nature, bike in nature, but not actually have your real feet on the ground. And I can just feel there's something about that he's craving to slow down
Mhm.
and to connect.
Yeah.
What if in the wardrobe you can ask him to come and sit on your lap? Have you ever done that?
I haven't done that as consciously. It's interesting. We do certain exercises with leaders like length, width, and depth, and having leaders breathe into their full embodiment. But I don't imagine my little guy with me as I'm doing that, for example. I love that we get leaders out of their heads, literally, through breath work and different things that we do to get into their magic.
So I've done that, Rick, literally in the boardroom, people who are in position of power and have their hand on a lot of numbers. And here's what happened. I just want to share with you what happened.
Please.
I'm a woman, so it was a little bit easier. But I have to tell you that I didn't hear anything, no shares in the actual meeting. There was far more silence. And I knew I had pushed it because these people are really proud of their adult experience. And here I was saying, imagine these little boys, and they were all boys, are sitting on your lap. Everybody place your little boy, and they're looking, oh my God, not another one of these things. But I heard from every single, and there were 30, it was a board meeting, every single one of them. People went out of their way to find my contact information and write to me and connect with me and talk to me. So something must have gone somewhere that I heard from every single one of them. As in that world, when you get 100% response, something has affected someone. It was really amazing. I used the masculine word. I know how to package it, but I did go very far. And I really would love to see man doing that in a man's meeting. And I'm not talking about genders.
No, I appreciate that very much. We will do some parts work individually in coaching, but I haven't really done that in a boardroom setting that you're describing. I'm going to play with that. That's wonderful.
Super interesting. You got to report back to us how that goes. I'm very curious.
There's some opportunities coming up, so I will let you know.
I think Richard, didn't you bring a teddy bear to a board meeting one time?
I did. I took a teddy bear and everybody freaked out. I took a teddy bear, and that was actually, it was a smaller meeting and most of them knew me, but it was really frightening. It's really interesting that we are frightened to connect to the young part of us. I am so protective of this image that I have built. What if there is a wonderful little girl sitting here as well? And that's the absolute fear. And once I address that highest fear, everything becomes so easy. And then I don't know if I told you, Ben, that I asked them if they feel they can bring their teddies to the next meeting. And I took some extra teddies. So one person had not brought one, and I placed one on his lap. And it was quite a story. But
yeah, it's amazing how much we crave that, especially, I think, as men who have a tendency to become more rational, more in the mind, less in the heart. When I and other men that I know, when we get chances to connect with that inner child and we break through those barriers, it's such a sigh of relief. Oh, I miss this. I miss this. This feels so good. It feels so natural. Connecting with my inner child has been a big part of my process. And on the other side, there is this higher version of me, this higher, wiser self. It's not an accumulation of Ben and all of his life experiences. It's beyond that. For me, there's a higher intelligence at play. And when it comes to my intuition, I find that I'm happiest and I'm most attuned when I'm both listening to that inner child, that playful, spontaneous self. And also there's something, it seems like, beyond me that is also guiding me. I'm curious to know for you, Rick, what is your relationship to that higher intelligence? Because your book, it talks about the more practical basis for intuition. This is a little bit more intangible, a little bit more esoteric. So I'm curious to hear your relationship with that, if you have it.
Yeah, I think that's the most important relationship in my life. It's the one I love the most. Doesn't mean I always listen to it. Doesn't mean I always heed it. I'm not claiming that, but it is the true, like when I feel aligned and connected to my higher guidance and self, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be in my life, and I'm on the path and I'm doing what I'm here to do. And it's the greatest feeling. And the opposite is true too. When I have felt the most lost and the most depressed or confused or anxious is usually when I feel the most disconnected from that higher self, higher guidance. So I've definitely had several experiences of both, as I'm sure you both have as well. So for me, it is the primary relationship And part of I feel like my deepest work is to help people connect with that higher sense of self, that higher alignment. And then whatever they're here to do with, that's their business. That's amazing. Go for it. Do it. Whatever that expression looks like. But I love helping people connect with that intelligence and that depth. And you're right. I don't talk about it so much like that in the book because of what you mentioned, the word mitra around packaging. The book was very much more intentionally, how do I bring these two worlds together that seem so separate? There's more languaging around like innovation and connecting with your creativity and like those kinds of things, which are true. But you're right. I don't as much talk about the spiritual or the higher self component directly, but very much that's my map and my territory.
So how are you cultivating that now? And how is that playing a role right now? How has that been manifesting for you? Because it sounds like before we started this conversation, there's a lot of amazing things unraveling for you and your business, your coaching business.
I've got a fun story. Did you guys ever used to watch Mr. Rogers?
Yeah.
No?
Barely.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah,
saw that?
Ben is too young for that.
It was like right around Sesame Street time, maybe right before.
No, he was around when I was a kid. I never connected too deeply with Mr. Rogers.
Okay. So here's where I was going with that. He had one little puppet named King Friday. Mitra remembers. And so King Friday, like the classic king with the white beard, white goatee, the elder.
Yeah.
I don't know how this popped in my head, but my image of God was King Friday from Mr. Rogers. I have no idea. But that's what God looks like. That's God. Of course, a man, older man, white beard. That was my conditioning.
And usually was standing on top of something.
Yeah.
Remember?
Very powerful little puppet. He was a powerful puppet. It was, So that somehow was my image of the higher power, God, whatever term you want to use. And it was funny where for a long time I had that relationship that there was some authority figure that was higher up, separate, something to pray to, ask for guidance with. But in some ways, I realized I had a Santa Claus relationship with God. Like I would talk to God when I wanted things, when I wanted presents and gifts and help and support. And I didn't realize that was happening. So for many years, and I think I was influenced by how I saw my mother's relationship to prayer and God and those kind of things. And it felt pretty materialistic growing up for me. And so I adopted that. Or when I was in trouble and wanted out of a situation, or I wanted some gifts or things, that's usually when I prayed or asked for help. I think the big shift, Ben, to answer your question, is what it feels like now and what I've been working on also still is having more of a friend relationship.
Yeah.
And more of a conversation that's two-way and on.
Yeah. I resonate with that.
That has been, and that still is my work, to still keep moving from the old frames that I've had about like a one-way, hey, help, or I need something, to more of an actual like daily, hey, how's it going, bud? How's it going, friend? I'm struggling right now, or things are great and I'm so grateful right now. There's always that reverence that hasn't changed, but it doesn't feel the same as it did before, where I had the authority projection way too far above and I made myself way too low, which I think is common for a lot of religions out there. And so that's been an ongoing, more of like an integration where honestly, I don't feel like spiritual and material are actually separate. And I used to have them as separate. Oh, I'm doing spiritual work now. Oh, hold on, time out. I'm going to be spiritual for half an hour. Hold on. Hold the phone, please.
So what does that look like for you, weaving the two together?
Yeah, it looks less formal. So what do I mean by that? I do a cold plunge practice most days.
I love cold plunge.
Oh my God. Yeah. And it really is like a meditation for me, truly.
Yeah.
And there's a center right by my house here, Southern California, where they do cold plunge, hot plunge, and sauna. So you get in this zone when you do this rotation, and literally it's this beautiful moment where I get to reflect. And I share my gratitudes. My heart opens up. I slow down. I go internal. I don't have screen time. That's a big one for me. That's a huge one. That's probably the biggest one, I think, for me and probably most people listening, is one of the number one addictions right now is our screen time. I know it is for me. And so that's part of it, is removing some of the noise and distractions so that I can tune into my relationship more immediately. That's been a game changer and continues to be. So anywhere where I can find time to put down the phone and connect is huge.
Yeah, and we have so many opportunities throughout the day to do that. Sometimes for me, it's just finding those pauses throughout the day. It doesn't need to be half an hour. It could be a 2-minute pause. Just that gap between two meetings, instead of looking at my phone and checking emails, just taking a moment to be with myself and breathe and just be present. It's like a mini reset. And I love what you shared about God, your relationship to the higher power being one of friends. I have a friend who, for him, he says, God is my partner. He's my business partner in life. We're on the same level. We're making decisions together. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I also sometimes use that idea of we're co-pilots.
Yeah.
And I know who the real captain is, but darn it, I'm a co-pilot. And I can override things to a point. Oh, let's go right, even though that might not be the best pathway.
Yeah.
But that's what we need to learn. And so I feel that grace on both sides of, I love that idea of, okay, we're both flying the vehicle and we both have controls.
Total paradigm shift.
Total.
Yeah.
From going from like that to something that's actually like this.
It feels different. It feels different in the body. Emotionally, it feels different to approach it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I get fired up about sometimes is that while there's a lot of beauty and truth and discipline in religions, the destruction in some ways is how it's separated us from a direct relationship. Like to me, that's the travesty is if there's a middleman or a book or something in the way of a direct relationship, that to me is the scam and the heartbreak.
Because it brings separation.
Exactly.
Because then in our mind, I want to say mine is better than yours. Mine is younger, older, higher, whatever. There are different words for it. The mind starts competing as soon as there is as you said, the middle person in there. But I'm really interested in that partnership that you spoke about with God. And I'm just wondering, I'm not going to let the little boy go. I'm wondering if there's any room, because here is you, Rick, daily physical life, but who is very aware of also the invisible, non-physical life. I'm just painting the picture for what you said. And then he is connected to the source of that invisibility and where everything comes from. So now the connection, I see, talking about religions, I see Trinity here, and not just two. I see the third piece, which is that little Rick, because you started your story with that the one with the magic that reminds you of the magic. I think he needs to be also very much present. In fact, he may be the one that reminds you more of that connection that may not always be in your awareness. So I would love to see and hear more about the magic in this trinity of relationship, where you hold the space of true connection to what you're talking about. Because you see, it's easy if I'm doing just executive coaching, but you're doing something very specific in that world of executive coaching. You're talking about intuition. You're talking about the gut feeling. You're talking about something that is completely invisible. So I think bringing that little boy with the magic, and I don't know how you want to dress him or package him in the worlds of more masculine, rational mind. But I think he's just crucial. His existence and presence is crucial in a partnership.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's a good reminder to be more conscious around that and more conscious integration around that. What you're saying, even imagine he's right next to me or in my lap as I'm leading an exercise or talking to a team or whatever it might be. Or even if I'm shooting video for a course. It's been more like when I'm getting triggered by something, then I'll examine and explore and I'll put attention on that, but not just in the daily meditations of life, through the rhythms of life.
Yes.
So I appreciate what you're saying, that there's another level of integration and friendship with that.
I like that word. Yes. He brings the magic and playfulness and a sense of daringness that sometimes we lose, especially when we sit in closed doors. Your relationship with the source brings an element of knowingness that may not be present to our physical human body. And then there is Rick, who represents the physical, practical translation of this physical world. So there's such a great combo sitting there. So now, sorry, stop me from doing this. I want to ask a question. I don't want to tell an answer. I want to ask, have you ever been stuck with translating this invisible wisdom, knowing, know-how to a person who's too constrained and attached to the physical world?
For sure.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. I've seen this pattern several times where it's like you learn eventually when you've been coaching for a while, which I know you have, therapy coaching, guiding, helping, mentoring. You can't coach people if they're not coachable. And I've learned that the hard way, because even though it's like when I was in my 20s, I was trying to coach my parents. Can anyone relate to that?
You lose the climate and the family at the same.
That was actually a good life lesson for me. I was like trying to coach mom and dad and even my younger sister. She's, I do not need a third parent. Thank you. I had to bump up against that several times to realize, oh, my insights might not be appreciated, or maybe they're unsolicited and I don't actually have their buy-in or their permission. And so it's actually invasive of me to share what I might be seeing or sensing. And I've had that done to me too. I had this one girlfriend in grad school who was incredibly intuitive, and she would just say the thing and poke and be a bit invasive with what she saw. And I wasn't really ready to process or hear that at the time. And so it felt like I had to defend myself, or, whoa, what are you talking about? This is too much. I wasn't ready. And she probably could have delivered it in a different way on her side, but also she wasn't reading out that you might be telling me some true things. I'm just not in a place to receive that right now.
What if they are ready, but they're just not getting what you want to communicate because that's a foreign world for them? What about that? Because if they've come to you, somehow they're ready for something.
Yeah, I love that idea of meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
And so I have to be careful as the coach not to put my needs, like, I need you to see this, or I need you to connect this dot because I need that, which I've been there before also. My ego of, I need to give you value. You need to get value from this section. And so I love that idea, and that's kind of cliche, but it's true, around meeting people where they're at. And then where can I help stretch an additional 10%? I don't have to blow people out of the water or push them too far. I love the idea of the comfort zone, growth zone, and panic zone.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can see when you push people too far, which I've done before in different settings, where they're not ready for that. And it's actually not kind to take them there in the deep end of the water if they don't trust their ability to float. And so that's where I try to assess, hey, how can I stretch this a little bit more with this person? Are they up for that?
What this reminds me, Rick, is intuition is not only about quieting the mind, tuning into the body, asking the right questions. Those are really important, but also having a strong sense of self, a healthy connection with our inner child, right? And that self-awareness that you just mentioned, right? Because if our ego gets in the way, if our ego wants to make sure we're giving value, actually we're telling ourselves it's for them, but really it's for us, right? That's when it interferes with our intuition, I find, because otherwise it's clear and it's simple.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something you mentioned in your book, when the intuitive answer is always easy, it's clear, it's simple, there isn't an emotional charge. So I'm curious, what do you personally do to stay connected to self and keep ego in check, right? Or keep distance from ego?
Amazing question. A lot of times I'll set like an intention or a prayer before I meet with the person, whether it's a one-on-one or I'm doing a workshop or whatever the situation. I will often do a prayer of, please help me serve this person or this group of people to the highest level that I can. And please help assist and come through in whatever ways to make the greatest impacts, whatever needs to happen. So in some ways, like letting go of a certain agenda of what needs to happen, because I don't always know. If I'm the co-pilot, I might not always know exactly what needs to happen. I might have my own ideas, but that might not be what the moment needs.
Yeah.
And so part of that is setting some kind of intention or prayer ahead of time helps, because then I'm a little more aware of my agendas if they do start to bubble up. And then I'll just say, secondly, like when I'm in the moment, one thing I've learned, I had to learn the hard way originally, but learning to adjust on the fly. If I think I need to do this thing with this group of people or this team, but they're in a very different place that morning. And so you can start to read the room. That's one of the things that we work a lot on, is how do you read the room? I was in London giving a workshop, and I was doing too much lecturing, and their eyes were glazed over. And I had too many slides. And I was trying to give them so much information and content and value in my head, but I lost them in the room. And at some point, I just stopped. I said, time out. What's going on out there? Where are you guys? Are you bored? Are you taking in information? Are you sitting on a question? Like, what's happening out there? And me just like stopping, which actually felt risky in the moment, because I had my plan, I had my slides, I had the things I wanted to cover. I wanted to give them value, but I was willing to just stop everything and just have a conversation. And I didn't know where it was going to go. And those are my favorite moments, because then the room came alive. People woke up out of their glassed eyes and started to share. And I just realized, oh, it wasn't about overwhelming them with good content. It's about actually having a conversation. And one of my favorite things that I've learned, and I still learn, is when I can name the disconnect, it puts me back in connection. So when I can name, hey, you guys seem a little distracted or tired or bored, what's going on? So I'm naming the possible disconnect, and then now we're in a real conversation.
Yeah, which goes to what you had started this conversation with, which is that those invisible conversations that are happening. Something is happening and you're just calling it out. And most of us have the habit of ignoring it and just bulldozing our way through our original plan. I love what you just shared. So what I heard you say is, one, you go into a prayer and it's about tuning in to the highest good of all. This is not about Rick. I'm putting Rick's agenda to the side. There is a balance and order to things, and I want to tune in to that, and I want to do what's in the highest good of all. I love that. And then it's embracing the unknown. So realizing that if we are going to follow this path of intuition, sometimes it's going to surprise us, and sometimes there's just no way to plan for it. And we have to be willing. We can set a plan, but we have to be willing to abort and to pivot if we need to. And then the last one, because it's all about connection, human connection, our life, it's invariably tied to that. And the word that came to my mind was attunement, is continually attuning to the people that we are connecting with. And that also gets us out of our own heads, our own ego. We're now connecting with the other person, which could be a dangerous thing, by the way, because we don't want to try and meet people's expectations, but we do want to attune to where they're at, adjust. So I love what you shared. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for playing that back. I love those words that you used. What's in the good of all, and attunement is exactly spot on.
Yeah.
And those help me separate my ego agendas and trying to be seen as valuable or impactful, which can be a trap that I fall into sometimes. If you guys ever study the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 3, which is all about performance and sometimes presentation and making impact. And so that's very important to a 3, but they can be driven for the wrong reasons at times to get a sense of value and that they're okay if they're able to do those things. And so I have to always watch that for myself. And those two things do help create a little more space.
Thank you.
Interesting that you went from naturally being into presentation and the physical world into writing and becoming a kind of an expert in the translation of invisible to the visible. That's very interesting to me. But I want to hear about, we heard about how you listened to your intuition, and I assume it worked going to France eventually.
It worked. I had to
Okay.
go through a rough patch, but it worked out at the
Don't we all? I've lived in France, so
Okay.
I lived in Paris. Yeah. So my question is, can you tell us about an instant, and hopefully even work related, when you didn't listen to your intuition and you weren't very happy about that
Yes.
and you learned?
So
Pick the best.
this is why I wrote the book, actually, in a deeper way, is the times where I haven't listened to my intro. And there's so many in my life. I think a lot of them are more around when I can feel it's time to, something's completing, but I don't want it to complete.
Yeah.
And so I'll stay past the expiration date.
Yes.
I could think of a couple relationships like that, or even a career or two, or jobs like that. And I could feel the staleness that I mentioned before. Like there's a sense of feeling dead, and I don't feel my passion. I don't feel alive, but it's comfortable. And I can do it in my sleep. Or I don't want to let go of a relationship that I can feel is there's an end point, and I'm afraid to venture into what's next. And I don't know what's next. And is this going to be as good as it gets? Am I always just going to be unsatisfied? And I'm too picky. So that's the kind of inner critic voices that I'll hear.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll always just be unsatisfied and too picky. This is a great relationship. What are you doing? Why are you going to throw a grenade in the middle of this living room again? And so there's these kind of inner critic stories I have to work with at times.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is when I have a feeling that's not going away, there's probably something to it. So if there's a feeling that the relationship is not what I need right now, or this career choice or the job is, there's something else for me. This happened recently in the last year, actually, where I was working with someone else and I loved the work that I did for a while, but there was a point where I had to come into my own expression again. And the things that I want to teach and coach and the conversations I want to have. And I could feel the limiting nature of working for someone else, and it just wasn't in alignment anymore. Where in the beginning it was, and then that changed. But I also stayed longer than I probably needed to. And so sometimes there's a carry cost. There's like a cost by staying longer at times. Yeah. And I think life gets louder, and maybe I start to feel less satisfied, more miserable, more struggle, more heavy if I don't listen to my intuition.
Yeah. I say, do you want to hear it at the whisper or at the shout? They're both available. Some people say, that's enough.
And so that was one of my drivers for the book is what if I listen to, and what if we listen to our intuition the first time, not the sixth time?
Yes. And what do you think? Because I'm hearing maybe there is a little bit of, as there is for all of us, pattern there, that it's hard for you to let go of the familiar and jump into the unfamiliar. And so how do you use your learning around intuition to work with that?
I think I've just been through enough cycles. I think part of it is life experience. Like I've been through enough cycles to know when I'm starting to feel deadened by something. I then start to ask, what is it? Is it my job situation? Is it where I'm living? Is it some other thing that's influencing my life in that moment? It could be a relationship or other relationships, or communities not feeling as connected as it used to, and maybe that's changing. So it could be on different levels, but it has me start to ask those questions. I remember I was in University of Washington for undergrad. I never lived in Seattle before. I was born in Arizona, grew up in California, so I'm used to the sun. Now I'm in the Northwest, and it's gray, and it's raining, and it's June or July, and it's still like that. And I literally felt depressed. And I was also in a fraternity for 1 year, and I wasn't very happy in the Greek system, in the fraternity system.
Yeah.
It's not really my thing, but I met some great people, and it was an incredible experience. But I started to feel like there's more rules and heaviness in this environment, and I didn't feel free and creative, and I couldn't be myself all the way. So I was like, is it the fraternity? Is it that I'm in University of Washington and that's the problem? Or is it Seattle? So there were levels, and I didn't know which one was making me unhappy and where I wasn't aligned. So but I could tell something was off. I could feel in my intuition something wasn't aligned. That was clear. So the easiest thing I can change is the fraternity part. And so I moved out of that, and then my life started to blossom and things started to change. And it ended up being the right move. And I stayed in Seattle. I stayed at University of Washington, and then things really started to blossom for me. But that was the moment of listening to something's off. I don't know what it is. It's unknown. And so I want to be in that conversation and explore.
Do you use muscle testing or?
I don't do it on myself. Is that something that you're doing now?
I do this thing where I put my hand in front of my chest and I sense a shift in energy. So when it's a yes, I feel an expansion of energy as if my hand is wanting to push out. And when it's a no, it's a contraction of energy. So I've been using that to help me tune my intuition. What do you have a go to? Like you pay attention to your heart or your gut?
Yeah, it's mostly my body. I'm more of a kinesthetic body intuitive. Sometimes I'll get visuals or audio, but I'm more body centered overall. And so it's usually, I'll play like a game called red light, green light, where if I feel like I'll ask a question that I really don't know what's in my best interest or the best interest of all. And I'll hold that question and I'll just feel like, does that feel like a green light to move forward in that direction? And then if there's any doubts or fears, I then try to play with, is that a red light or am I just afraid? And I'll try to feel through those layers and to get a sense of, is there a real no or is it a real yes? What I'm trying to say is, how do you separate emotional reactivity
That's
from
a big
intuitive
one.
intelligence?
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes.
Because I think that's where most people don't trust their intuition, is they collapse the two.
Yep. They're trusting something that's not their intuition.
Exactly. So that's where I've played with, is that a real no? Is that just fear? Or is that overexuberance?
And the hallmark is something that you point out in your book, and one that I've discovered in my own experience is when it's intuition, there's no emotional charge. There could be joy, there could be excitement, but there isn't a strong emotional charge to it. It's simple and it's clear. It's not complicated. The answer is always a very simple answer, and it's always just the next step. If the mind is trying to create a whole plan around an intuitive nudge, then it's either not intuition or the mind is now skewing the intuition.
Totally. And I like to say, like what you just said there, where if I usually in the exact moment when I'm getting an intuitive hit about something, there's not a lot of drama and charge and story. Oh, this career's winding down for me, or this relationship has an expiration date. Now, I might have a lot of emotions about that later, and that's okay too. And it's healthy, I think. If there's going to be changes, there's going to be probably grief and loss of something that I'm not choosing. And yet, if I really look at the moment, that's usually where there's like a clear matter of fact, oh, this is the turn left.
Yep.
When you're ready and you feel that this may help our listeners, I would love to hear a guided kind of practice around connecting to our intuition. What do you think about that, Rick?
Yeah, you know what? I was just actually thinking of your previous question. I was sharing more generals about when I haven't listened to my intuition, but I actually have a specific example that came to mind that might be interesting. So maybe I'll share that briefly. So this is way back in the day. I was a life coach before I was a business and executive coach. I was a life coach, and we were running a workshop, and it was like a year-long training of coaching coaches how to coach. It basically sold out, and we were about to launch this year-long program. There was this one guy who wanted to join late, and we'd already pretty much set everything. And I had two facilitators I was working with that were running it with me. And one was really the owner, and then we were both the two others of us were helping out and what have you. And I had bad feelings about this one guy in my gut, bad, toxic, not good. Don't let this guy in. It's going to be trouble. It was very clear to me. And I talked to my co-facilitators about this. And they were like, they wanted to have him in to the program. They wanted him in. I think a lot of it was probably financially driven. I think that was a big part of it. And we all knew this guy to some degree. Maybe also they felt like they could help this person and what have you. And so anyway, I didn't really stand for my conviction, and I didn't stand for what I believed and what I felt really strongly. I didn't listen, and I didn't stand for it. And so I let myself get convinced that it was going to be okay, that let's let this guy in. It's all good. Fast forward in a year-long program, several months in, this guy had some real psychological issues. And I won't get into all the details, but I'll just say there was some abusive stuff going on, and it got ugly outside of the program, but also inside the program. And there were just some toxic behaviors, and then it got pretty ugly in terms of threatening lawsuits and all kinds of stuff, and setting boundaries, and then having a lot of reaction to that. And it just ended up being a really ugly situation. And I kicked myself afterwards because I knew I didn't trust this person or their intentions of wanting to be in the program for the right reasons, and I didn't stand for it. And this is what I wanted to share. One of the most painful feelings that I have ever felt is self-betrayal.
Oh, yeah.
Like when I betray myself, it's a certain kind of sting that's different than other stings. It's a certain kind of pain of like when I don't listen to myself on a fundamental level. And so I didn't listen to myself, and I felt like I betrayed myself, and there was a cost. And then we all had to deal with that cost for a while afterwards, during and a while afterwards. And it got messy and it was tough. And it was like what you said, like there's a whisper and then there's the shout. And so we waited too long, and I didn't stand for my truth in that moment. And so there's many stories like that, but that's one that really comes to mind where there was a cost because I didn't really honor myself.
Wow, that's amazing. I always hear people saying, deep down, I knew. And I'm thinking, isn't that deep down always available to us? Do we need to wait until the shout comes in?
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful story. But then I think you weren't the only decision maker in your defense. So
Totally.
it makes it much easier when you're the only one.
It's true. It's totally true. And I felt like if I really stood for what I believed, they would have listened, I believe. If I really, but I would have had to really double down on that.
And we need those experiences, right? Because those experiences help us hone our intuition. It becomes tricky when other people are involved. And next time, I'm going to double down. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So you're right. These are the things that we learn, like I learn, and then it inspires things like the book of what if we listen to it the first time versus the sixth time?
Yes.
That helps.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a practice?
Yes.
If it feels good for you, I would love to be guided by you to somehow connect to our intuition, because I'm sure our listeners are saying, okay, that sounds good. Can you just give me a sample of how it's done? Or as your French people say, just give us an échantillon. Like, how does it work? I'm sitting somewhere, I'm making a decision from buying a car or saying yes to a proposal or accepting this job. Okay. Guide me through that.
I'm going to do a fun one. Are you up for a fun exercise?
Oh, always.
Okay. Now, here's going to be the challenge in today's world. Can you find a coin near you?
Oh.
If there's two sides to something.
Yeah. Okay.
So see if you can find something around you. And for the listener out there, if you can find a coin, or it doesn't matter what currency, it could even be a Bitcoin if you have a physical representation of that. So think of any kind of, if you have something nearby, let me know. If you have.
Okay. I do. I have a crystal that has two different sides. I'm going to call the two sides different things.
Okay. Yeah. So it can be a rock or a crystal. It could be any object, as long as you can determine there's two different sides to it. That'll be helpful in this dimension.
Yes.
Okay. Because we are limited by time and gravity in this dimension. So here's what I'm going to have each of you do. First, I want you to think about a choice or a dilemma or something that's going on for you in your life right now. It could be small. It could be something as simple as, do I want to go away for the weekend or stay home? Or it could be something that's more significant to you. It could be a major career choice or something that's larger for you. So each of you take a moment just to think about some kind of choice that's presented itself to you recently that you're still sitting with and you're not totally clear. So let me know when you each have an example of that.
I have one.
Likewise.
Okay, great. So for a moment, I'm going to invite you both to close your eyes and just take a couple slow, deep breaths, bringing your full attention to right now, to this breath, this moment, this body. And as you're connecting to your full bodily intelligence and experience, I want you to bring up that idea or that dilemma to mind of which choice is best for me? Which choice is best for all involved? We could think about choice A and choice B. So you can label one of them choice A. For example, if I should stay at my job, that might be choice A. If I should leave my job, maybe that's choice B. So assign an A and a B, if you would, to these two options. And when you're ready, I'll have you look at the object you can open your eyes and I'll have you look at the object in your hand and assign a side A and a side B to your object. So one of them is going to be side A, maybe I stay at my job, and side B might be I leave my job. So assign both of those sides to your physical object. All right, here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to have you each on camera flip your object in air and catch it. And the first side to get to five of those sides, if I get to heads 5 times, that's going to be the side that actually wins. Okay? So I want you to both to play with that right now. Keep flipping your object and see which one gets to 5 faster, the A or B option. So I'll give you some moments to play with that. And let me know when you've come to your answer.
Okay. Wow.
Got it.
Okay. Would you both mind sharing briefly which side won?
Yeah. So I've been contemplating if it's attuned for me to leave LA for a little bit. And I just haven't been sure because there's many things I love about staying here, but something is also calling me to spend some time elsewhere. And quite frankly, I don't know where that elsewhere is right now. But yeah, side A was to stay. Side B was to leave, at least temporarily. And I got the first one was A, and then the five consecutive after that was B's to leave LA, which is not surprising to me because I've had an intuitive hunch that that's what is aligned for me.
Okay, great. Yeah. So side B won in this case.
Yeah.
Mitra, let's hear yours, and then I'll share one more piece.
I'm deciding which marketing company to go with. And I talked to somebody this week. And my question was, should I go with her or not? Side A was yes, side B was no. And it was 2 and 3 to no. So the answer was no. 2 was yes.
Okay.
And 3 was no.
So here's going to be the interesting moment. I want you to throw out whichever one won, whether it's 5 or 2 and 3. Throw that out for a moment. How did your body actually feel? What signals did you get when it was going in either direction? What is your body and your wisdom actually trying to tell you about your choice, no matter which one won in terms of the accumulation of sides? What did you learn right now?
My body was saying also no. So it was in accordance with what happened. I was wishing, if you like, the better way for me, I was wishing it would be no. So that gave me a lot of information.
Okay. And how do you get your no? How does that come to you, your signals?
Contraction and expansion.
Of like your stomach or your whole body? Or
it's energetic. Ben has far more information about that. But it's for me, like is my total body contracting going in, or my body is expanding and going out, wants to be open to this experience.
Amazing tracking. That feels aligned. Thank you. How about you, Ben?
Similar. I'd say for me, generally, when it's an intuitive yes, there's a spaciousness. Feels like in my body energetically, there's an openness, there's a spaciousness, and it feels comfortable. But in instances like now, I feel that, and I also feel contraction, but it's a different kind of contraction. It's of the mind, because there's also all sorts of fears and doubts that I notice my mind has about leaving. And I'm also able to notice how that's creating the opposite effect in my body, contraction. But when it's of the mind, it's more targeted. Intuitively, it's a general kind of like this overall contraction, whereas whenever it's the mind, I observe that it's like I feel contraction in my head specifically or in my chest. And it's not a subtle contraction either. It's stronger. It's a little more dramatic, right? Intuition for me is generally more subtle. The response is more subtle and softer. Softness, I'd say, is a characteristic of my intuitive nudges.
I love that. You both are so incredibly self-aware. It's so fun to get to play in this way with you because you're advanced in that way and into the subtleties. I want to share with you the real secret of this exercise of the coin toss, I call it. So it doesn't matter which side won more times than the other.
Mhm.
That actually is used to engage your rational thinking mind so
Mhm.
that your subconscious can actually connect the dots underneath. And I found that when the rational mind is distracted a little bit, it's easier for our intuition to connect. So
Mhm.
that's actually what's more important is what side were you rooting for? What side was your body rooting for? What side
Mhm.
was your energy and spirit rooting for? Because usually we do have a preference. There is something
Mhm.
that we were wanting or think is going to be in our higher expression.
Yes.
And so when I've done this exercise with a lot of people, even if someone gets, oh man, I got 5 heads, but I wanted tails. What's going on? And so that's amazing because that's really what this is about. Is it's helping you start to learn to
Interesting.
trust
Yeah.
your signals, not just the rational thinking of, oh, I got 5 of these.
Yes.
So that's the wisdom behind that exercise, which I love.
Yes.
It works.
Yes. So if I had 5 out of 5 and I wanted the opposite, you as my coach will suggest and recommend that I go with the one I wanted rather than what came.
Yes, I would say the real point of the exercise is to learn how to tune into the signals of your body and being.
Yes.
And that's what we're here to train.
Yes.
And one of my favorite things is let's help you separate signal from noise. Signal is that what you just got? Noise would be, oh, but I'm supposed to do 5 because I got 5. So I have to do that now. And
Yeah.
so that's where I love this exercise, and it's simple. Everyone can do it. Everyone gets it when they actually use it. So it's a
Yes.
fun thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was great, Rick. I'm so glad I asked.
Thank you for asking.
I love that, Rick. Thank you. This was a great conversation.
I enjoyed it,
This,
folks.
this was wonderful. And
I like
Rick,
the Holy Trinity.
the Holy Trinity.
Yes.
Rick, before we wrap up, if you could share a little bit more about your work and what are you doing? I know you work with executives and CEOs, and for our audience members who might be interested to learn more about you and what you do,
Yeah.
can you
thank
please share?
Yeah, thanks for that. So my company's called Invisible Edge, and basically we're based in the US and also in Europe. And we have a whole team of coaches, amazing human beings, and we are passionate about people leadership. So
Mhm.
once again, it's like that class we never got on how to lead people when we're all of a sudden leading a team. We've gotten promoted. We were a great individual contributor, and now it's a whole different dimension to lead other people. I could be the best software engineer in the world, but not know how to run a team of software engineers. So that's exactly where we come in, whether we're doing one-on-one executive coaching, executive team coaching, manager training, team and people training. It's all about that people leadership side of the equation that we're so passionate about and helping making the invisible visible in all these conversations. So you can go to invisible-edgellc.com, and that's where you'll find all of our stuff.
Wonderful, Rick. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Really appreciate you.
Thank you. You really played with us. And I love the good balance of the little Rick and the adult Rick. And thank you.
Of course. Yeah. You're welcome. And thank you both. I very much enjoyed that.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. For a list of the links and other resources referenced in this episode, check out the podcast description.
If you're benefiting from our podcast, we'd love if you could help us reach more people by subscribing. Your support means the world to us. From our hearts to yours, we thank you.